Hello, and welcome to a Bon Mott's production of
MOTSterpiece Theater,
where we review critically acclaimed cinema spanning the breadth of human filmmaking.
MOTSterpiece Theater,
Spoilers, mature content, inappropriate language. Join us.
MOTSterpiece Theater. MOTSterpiece Theater.
Welcome back to another episode of MOTSterpiece Theater. Today we are doing Taxi Driver, which is one of my favorite movies.
Great movie.
I'm Jonathan Ian Manser, here with Scott Thurlow.
You talking to me?
I don't see anyone else here.
You must be talking to me.
I'm here.
Except for Stephen Ramosi.
Guys, I think you forgot about me.
Oh, yes.
So we're going to start off in our usual sense with a funny log line. And this movie is basically the realistic version of Death Wish.
Yes, I rather like that description.
So, Scott, would you like to give her the real synopsis?
Sure. It's about a disenfranchised / perhaps disillusioned young ex-Marine who's sort of adrift in the world and sees all the corruption and decay in generally New York in the mid to late 70s, and attempts to go on a redemption tale, or stumbles into one, almost, more or less.
All right. So we're going to move on to Steevo with the actual introduction.
The film opens up with a nice little soft jazz number playing, which kind of plays throughout the entire film. But the opening is just a cab driving the streets of New York. It's rainy, and there's actually a line about the rain later on, pretty early on in the movie.
Yeah.
But, it kind of calls back to that original opening scene. We meet our anti-hero, Travis, as he goes in to try and get a job driving a cab. And as he says, he'll drive anywhere, anytime.
Work anytime, anywhere.
That's right. I was talking briefly with Scott about this earlier. I think that the intro is kind of over when he gets the job. I think it's a brief intro. I don't know if you have other ideas there, Ian.
I actually would argue that the introduction is very long, and that
I knew you were gonna do this, but go ahead.
Because yes, you're introduced to Travis, but it slowly everything sets up all of the main players, and I think that when he gets rejected by the woman he has fallen for, Betsy, and he starts down the path of really disconnecting with the world, is when the introduction stops, and the body is him regressing, and starts formulating the plans on how to revenge himself against society.
I can see that. I don't know if it's because I view Betsy as not so much a main player, I guess. She kind of, as soon as her part is over, she kind of goes away and doesn't come back.
But she's the catalyst that sets the rest of the plot in motion.
I
That's
kind of
true.
agree with that. Yeah, it's funny because I absolutely knew you were going to make that argument about the introduction. And we have this, not problem, but this has happened before where one of us says the introduction is very short and brief and it ends here. Another will argue that it actually extends further and then the plot gets rolling. I see both points, I think, but I think maybe it'll be like a 60-40 split for me on Steevo's side in this one.
Okay.
But I certainly see you can make the case for both. But to me, I think that setup is brief and everything else is encompassed in the body. Even that, yeah, she's the catalyst, but I think that's in the body itself that starts happening.
I'll play the politician here and say that I don't agree, but I will compromise and allow you to go with your introduction.
Thank you. Very gracious of you. But, I mean, what I'm going to say is, regardless of where you draw the line, I'll give a 1 to both.
Mm-hmm.
Where I draw is a 1, and I think even if, again, I said this exact thing in a previous cast, but yeah, even if you move the line to call that your introduction, probably still deserves a 1.
Well, I will give my 1 for the brief introduction, simply based on the choice of a theme song.
Yeah.
And
Sure.
It sets the tone right off, and this is a song that is going to be playing throughout
It's a repeated
the
motif,
entire
if you will. Yeah.
film. And one of the great strengths of this movie is showing the world through Travis's eyes.
Yes, I agree with that.
And again, right off the bat, they established that. And if you're going into his interview It's actually a well done interview. You
It's somewhat amusing, but still grounded in reality. Yeah.
but it
The
establishes
guys fighting
his,
in the background.
yeah, no, but that's actually a point I wanted to bring up. It establishes his character. You find out all the relevant information you need to know about him going right off the bat, and doesn't feel exposition dumped. It
Yeah,
feels
agreed.
very organic. And meanwhile, in the back of the scene, you see a wordless fight going on behind closed doors. And it's so distracting, but that's the point of also establishing his character. They do it visually and
Yes.
through a dialogue, where you're seeing him as that voyeur to the world, to all of the tragedy and anger that there is in this, in New York in this time. So I think that, again, it's brilliantly done.
I agree.
Yeah, I think that you are correct. I mean, as far as that part of the intro goes, it's you bring up a good point. It's like, this is the beginning of him watching other people, and a lot of this movie is about him looking at other people and like judging them and kind of getting pissed off by them. And that's kind of the intro where, like, you know that he sees these two guys fighting in the background, even though it's going on. The guy that's interviewing him has his back to them, so he's completely oblivious to this entire thing. But Travis is looking at it the entire time. And I think it cuts right after that interview where he gets the job, and it cuts to like a while later. I don't know how long it's supposed to be, but he's talking about the job and all this type of stuff. That leads into the body. So I'll cut that off there. But yeah, I'll give the intro one for that.
All right, and Scott, would you like to take over the body?
Yeah, another pretty good segue there, buddy. So when that cuts off, I think it's sort of implied. He even says it, like when the voiceover journals, it basically says the days go by like wind, more or less.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's purposely left sort of open ended. It could have been any amount of time almost. Could have been weeks, a week, a couple of days, a month even. Mm-hmm. It's sort of, he's adrift in time at that point and just doing his, his night taxi driving anytime, anywhere, as he says. And so I agree that the act, or what you said earlier, he starts meeting, or he sees Sybil Shepherd's character Betsy on the street, decides that she's the most beautiful woman he's ever seen, and starts trying to get up the courage to go in and go talk to her. She works at the campaign for the local senator, or the senator who's running for president at this time.
Creepily stalks her for a while.
So he
Palpatine.
he watches her. Yes, Senator Palpatine. He watches her outside via his cab. But I think that all speaks to what you're saying now. His voyeuristic nature. Like that's what he does. That's his connection to society, because he can't really connect in any other way. So eventually he decides to ask her out, and they seem to have a normal-ish date, like little cup of coffee, and then he tries to take her to the movies, and of course he takes her to a porno theater for some reason. So
Does he think he thinks that's normal? He has no idea.
Yeah, it's just because
that's weird.
Of course,
to
the whole
him.
point to his character is that he has difficulty connecting to
Right.
society as a whole, and of course there's a famous speech where someday the real rain will come and wash all the scum off the streets, etc. Like that's how he views. That's how he's living his life and how he views society in general. So I think he sort of, just bounces around, and he gets rejected by her after that, and that sort of puts him over the edge. Or is he impetus / catalyst, because he clearly was not the most stable of individuals before this. So then he, I think I'm going to working backwards, try to figure out where the body cuts off and the conclusion begins.
May I make
Yes.
my...
I think we might agree upon this one, though. Go ahead.
I think when he goes to assassinate...
Yes,
Yeah,
that's
to
exactly what
to
I
the
was
rally.
yes.
Yeah.
I think that's sort of the obvious
I would
spot
agree.
where it cuts off. Yeah, so everything, he eventually gets hooked up with a gun dealer and buys a whole bunch of guns and does a little MacGyver, like crafting little pouches and holsters for himself for them. And the famous "You Talking to Me" speech is all in that, and that all leads up, like it's him getting prepared for the assassination attempt. So it's all very well done. It's basically De Niro. A lot of it is just him on screen by himself, like going through his shitty life, more or less. Yes.
If I may interrupt for a second, you missed the secondary plot that's very
Yes, well, I'm
important.
getting to it.
Okay.
So then he runs early in Act 1, the body. He comes across, or a very young Jodie Foster climbs into a cab and is like, "Go right now," and gets pulled out by what we later found out was Harvey Keitel, her pimp. So that sort of sticks with him, and he sees her off. He voyeuristically cruises by, looking at her on the street, and eventually tries to formulate a friendship with her and free her from her situation, which we believe he does. We'll discuss that at the end. But yes, that's sort of after the Betsy thing. he sort of latches onto her as his perhaps path to redemption, or something he can do to help and reduce the amount of scumbaggery that he sees in society, or he could do one good thing perhaps, or at least attempts to, or comes to do that. So I think that's about where the body is. It was all very well done. Like I said, Scorsese does a lot of cool shots, and with him like just in the cab, like him looking in the rearview mirror, him watching the people again, even the random passengers, even that part where the guy says he's going to kill his wife because she's cheating, all that. So it's all very well done. You start to like almost also come into this character's head because of the way it's done, which speaks to style, yes, but still.
But this is Scorsese's masterpiece, I feel.
It's not his one and only, but it is a masterpiece, I agree.
But all the visual shots build up to the psychology of this character
Yes.
when he decides to take action. You see, he watches porno films in the adult theater. Again, voyeuristic. He's not taking the initiative to go out. He makes the attempt to pick up Betsy and go on a date, and is rejected from that, which forces him to fall even further into his world. You know,
Exactly.
that scene where, like, I think the real tipping point there is the scene where he's with that spurned husband who is watching his wife in another man's house, and is willing to take action against that and to change that. And I think that even though
You can see
De
the gears
Niro's
turning
not,
in his head even when that's happening.
Yeah.
For
I'm
sure.
saying that I should go ahead and take action in my world. It's kind of a deterministic quality he has, which is everything led me up in my life
his
to
outright line to that.
assassinate a
Yeah.
politician because a woman spurned him. It's a fascinating thought process there,
Yes.
but it turns out that everything in his life is leading up to rescue this young girl,
Yes.
but he can't see that. And I think I'm going to discuss this in conclusion, but what actually led him to that to save Jodie Foster. But overall, I think it's absolutely a brilliant movie.
It held together perfectly. I think this movie is paced perfectly. It's the perfect time. It was funny, we try to remember before we watched it how long it was. It's almost exactly 2 hours, which is perfect for it.
Right.
And there's not a single second wasted in this film, I think. So all that to say, the entire body holds together. Yeah, and right when it leads up, everything that needs to come together comes together at the time it does. There's nothing jarring about it. None of it doesn't make sense. Everything about it perfectly solid. So I'm definitely give the body a 1.
Yeah, I'm also gonna give it a 1. I don't know. I don't know if I have much to add to that. I think you guys
Like you said, it's a
did
masterpiece.
a pretty
so,
good job there. I mean, it's tough
are you gonna say?
it's tough
Sure.
to knock it. You know, on any part of the body. It's just everything leads perfectly into the conclusion.
Exactly. Yep.
And the conclusion addresses both parts of what's going on in the movie perfectly as well.
Okay, we're on to conclusion with me. I'm giving it a 1 as well, if you didn't know. So he goes to assassinate the senator who is in a primary campaign.
Yes.
And earlier on in the body, he was oddly scoping out the place, but doing a very terrible job, and got into a conversation with a
Secret Service guy.
Secret Service guy who recognizes him and sees him reach in his jacket for the actual gun that's there. And he ends up getting chased away from the scene. And I think at this part, his entire world has collapsed because he realizes he couldn't be the agent of change he wanted to there. And prior to that, he also had taken out a lot of money to give to Iris, Jodie Foster's character, to help her escape.
Yep.
So he goes there and just goes on a rampage, killing Harvey Keitel, a mobster that's there, the doorman who runs the hotel. Ends up getting into this intense fire. It's a very famous firefight.
Like you said, just real quickly, it's the realistic version of Death Wish. That's exactly at least that scene specifically, I think, is
Definitely
perfect
that.
description.
Yeah, definitely that scene was just. I think it was really cool. It was well done because it kind of starts off like I don't know what you wish you could do. You know,
what's the
it was like let me just go
power
in and
fantasy.
be a badass and take out this whole den of douchebags. But he gets brought back to reality very quickly when Harvey Keitel ends up not being dead and shoots him in the fucking neck.
Sure.
Yeah, and he gets
shot again in the shoulder.
constantly.
Yeah.
So there's a very famous argument, and I would like to delve into this a little bit.
Let's cover this now, yes.
Which is, all right, so the end of the movie is, it did this great shot of panning from Robert De Niro's character over all the destruction that has happened. And it looks like he died. The cops come in. He's been shot through the neck. He attempts to commit suicide, but all his guns are empty. And he puts a bloody finger to his head.
I always thought that like it was I know it's not meant to be comedic per se, but it just made me chuckle like every time I see that happen. But yeah. So when the cops find him, real quick, like you said, the cops find him and he puts makes a finger gun essentially while he's covered in blood.
But yeah, what makes that scene is the blood that's all over his hand.
Yeah,
and like he cocks it 3 times, his finger gun, cocks it 3 times, and then a drip of blood just like drops off. That was always the part. That was the like second that I was like, oh my god, this is an amazingly shot scene.
So then he's fine afterwards. You see on his wall he has taped a couple of the news stories about him. The father of Iris had sent him a letter, which is read out loud by him. And, he goes back to cabbing, going back to all of his
bullshit with his cabbie buddies.
His buddies there. And Betsy comes back in his life. And it's a weird converse back and forth between them. It's a lot of like, I don't know what to say to you, but I get the impression that I'm really attracted that you killed all these people. So, but there's an argument whether he died
if that's
or
like
not
his fantasy.
Before that.
And I went into watching, I've seen this movie many times. I went into watching it with trying to come up with a judgment. And I want to err on the side of it's all real.
Me too. I mean, see, the thing is, we quickly pre-discussed this, but yeah, you brought up now. I've heard that interpretation previously, but the first time seeing this movie, I didn't think that was the case, and subsequent times, I still think he actually survives and is on his way to inserting himself back into society. I don't think it's a fantasy of his death trip, essentially.
I have a very different view of this than you guys.
Okay.
I definitely think he's dead, and here's why: it's way too perfect. First of all, nothing bad comes of him going in and shooting up an entire place full of people, and the cops rolling in.
Yeah, he's the hero cabbie.
Yeah, sure, I guess so. Yeah, and that's what would happen in your like perfect wildest dreams. Like you'd be just the hero cabbie, get to go back to doing whatever you were doing. Your life goes back to normal. Second thing is, he seems way too normal. Like when he goes back to his cab job, it's like nothing ever happened to him. Granted, you don't get to see very much of him during that, but he acts exactly like he did in the beginning of the movie. He also looks like he did in the beginning of the movie with his hair. His hair is all grown back in.
Sure, I get it.
There's no remnants of the mohawk. I don't know how long it's supposed to be
well, it's
after
like the thing from the beginning. How
the
long
shooting.
has he been working for? Like I don't know.
You're not sure how long it's supposed to be, but everything seems too much like going back to the way that he was at the beginning of the movie to be real.
That's why I think it is, because if it was a kind of fantasy, if it was a death flash, it would have been more perfect.
I don't think how would it have been more perfect?
Because he returns to the mediocrity of his life.
Yeah, but he got exactly what he wanted out of that. Jodie Foster goes back home to her loving parents, who probably weren't all that loving in the first place. If their daughter, like, I mean, maybe they were. I'm judging. You're right. You didn't meet her parents. I can't judge them. But like, it just seems like she went back home and went back into school like he wanted her to. He becomes a hero of New York City, and despite the fact that he's a hero, he goes back to like driving cabs for a living. You put up a good argument there. I must say, you might have convinced me for that.
Yeah, I mean, again, I see both sides of it. I just never personally had that interpretation, but it certainly makes sense put that way. Sure. I just want to point out there, he did say one line at the very end when Betsy gets back in his cab and she asks him about, I saw you in the papers, whatever.
I didn't even mention that, but yeah, go on.
He said something like, it's no big, I got over that.
Yeah. I didn't even mention that.
Take that both ways, I guess.
The fact that Betsy like seems to love him at the end when she was completely disgusted by him when the last we left.
I don't know if I ever
and
got.
She just randomly gets into his cab, out of a city of however many people it was in the 70s.
I guess
it's in a city of like 10 million people. She just shows up, gets into his cab. He's like, hey, like acting very, very cool.
Yeah, she doesn't even get into his cab. They go, hey, she's in your cab. You have a ride in your cab.
She was waiting for him in his cab.
That might tip it over for me.
That's right. So, like, I don't know. It all just seems like it's too perfect for him. This is exactly all the things that he wanted to have happen.
You made a pretty good case. That's true. So I guess I'm trying to parse it out
I kind of
Either.
always thought that, like, even the first time I saw it, I kind of always thought he was dead, and like that was
All
kind
right.
of like
Good on you.
his quote unquote heaven.
Good
you
on you,
know?
I suppose. I think either way you can take it, it still is a good ending. But
Yeah, of
maybe
course.
It's even
I
better
really love
taken
it.
one way.
I'm actually going to bring this up in themes, but
Okay.
this movie reminds me a lot of one of my favorite novels, The Stranger.
Mm.
But the ending of The Stranger is also open-ended for whether he
True.
gets pardoned or he gets executed. So I think that it's a nice coincidence that two of my favorite works
good
have
parallel.
similar
Yes.
ambiguous endings.
And go listen to the Stranger podcast if you want to hear our thoughts on that one.
Yes.
Well, I'm giving it a 1.
I definitely am as well.
Oh yeah, I'm definitely gonna give it a 1 as well.
Travis
And I think,
Bickle is the modern Marcel.
I think either
Whether or
way
not
you
he
look
dies.
at it,
Yeah.
you can
Exactly.
you can appreciate the ending.
For sure.
Okay, and we're on to themes with Stephen Ramosi.
All right, so this movie goes into several themes. It has a lot to do with this feeling of loneliness and kind of desperation that
Yeah.
Travis is feeling. Like he's trying to find a way to change things while working within the boundaries of what he can do in society, and he's finding himself more and more ostracized from that society and more willing to go outside of the bounds of what's acceptable, I guess. And the way that they pace him going crazy, I guess, for lack of a better term, or like, just feeling more and
Falling
more
down the abyss,
ostracized
man.
from society is really perfect.
Yes. I agree.
Scorsese does an amazing job with that. It's kind of his spiral into insanity.
Yeah, I like that.
And you feel it almost as it's happening.
Sure.
He more and more becomes this kind of anti-hero that you're cheering for, but at the same time, it's kind of scary almost how both quickly but metered out his descent is. So
Oh, trust me, that's how it is in real life.
yeah.
I don't think it's scary. It's just accurate.
To that point you made earlier, it's a great symbol of the person who feels powerless in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned even earlier that it's kind of the endings are very much a power fantasy type. I forget exactly how you phrased it, but he lived out the idea of being the White Knight,
Right.
and saving, and you get to see the actual repercussions of that. Granted, especially if the ending is the thing where he died
Taken
and we
as
don't
such.
even know how it all played out. That's what a person who died during. You don't know if the actions you took would result in change.
Right. You don't know if it mattered.
So, in a sense, that is a far more depressing ending to Travis's
Which
life.
I like even
than-
better, though, because it may fits the film. I think you might be right. This might tie into the next question, which I'll be speaking about, but the theme is people are dicks. Like, the world is full of assholes, and he's trying to do something about it. Or he wishes that weren't the case, and his insanity leads him to a path of such that this is possibly the only... He even mentioned, you said, my whole life led up to this. Like, he feels he's compelled to do something about it, whether or not that something is assassinating a would-be presidential candidate or saving a girl from her pimp and then dying perhaps because of it, but imagining himself, in the White Knight scenario, as you just said.
It feels like him confronting the issue of that he hates people more and more throughout the film it feels like he's struggling with it. And there's one scene where he goes and talks to one of his buddies who drives a cab, the Wizard.
Just Wizard.
Peter Boyle.
Oh, Wizard, yes. And they talk about it, and he gets some advice that he thinks is probably the worst advice he's ever gotten in his life.
Yeah, if you,
You know-
recall, Wizard says to him, we're all fucked, more or less.
Basically, but his advice was to get out of his
Right.
own head and like
To go out, yes, sure.
He wasn't able to do that, and he says during that section, which is what I actually wanted to bring up, was that he says flat out to him, I've been having some really bad ideas, and I don't know what to do about it. And the guy's like, I don't know, you'll figure it out, basically.
Yeah. All right, there's a couple things. I wanted to bring up that scene as well because it is him reaching out and unable to find anyone who could help him. And Peter Boyle's, or the Wizard even says, like, look, I'm just a cabbie. I don't know what to...
He's like,
say."
but what do I know in the
But
end?
What about Bertrand Russell or whatever he said?
Yeah.
He also mentions that you become your profession.
Yes, he does say that
And-
twice, in fact.
Yes, Travis is becoming an antisocial, hating everyone around him, but it also is in a profession which he drives around to every single neighborhood.
He sees the worst
He
of
sees
people.
the worst
Yeah,
of it.
exactly.
And it's what he wants to see. Yeah, he has he reaches out one time to a better world in a way, with Betsy, and is rejected quickly from it, which is because he's a creature of the world that he hates.
I like that interpretation. Yeah.
So I want to talk about the stranger quickly, and it's kind of some idea of a person who's ostracized from the world, and he finds bedfellows with people who are also ostracized, and cannot connect with reality, and it creates violence. But to make a kind of jokey theme, this movie, upon watching it, has kind of some conservative elements to this, particularly stating that, I think a lot of it comes down to when he's talking with Jodie Foster, and it feels like a special episode of a TV show.
Yeah, sure.
The more you know should have went across the...
What, am I square? No, you're square.
Yeah. I'm not the one to sell my body on that. But he could have gone down two paths. One, he could have become an anarchist and assassinated a politician who is the most generic politician of all time.
Right.
And fought against the establishment. But he became a hero by fighting the scum within his own class.
No, I like that. That's pretty well said. I enjoy that.
So I think it kind of has this don't punch up. Fix what you can in your own neighborhood. Be Bernie Getz.
I'm not sure whether or not that's intentional, but I still like it as an possible theme or within themes. I'm not sure. Again, I said what I said, and probably, like I said, it ties into the next question. But yeah, he's trying to make some kind of connection to society at large, or at least try to bring himself to be able to connect more than he has been. And if this is the way, if that avenue, like you said, is the way he can do it, perhaps it's the best for him, and not trying to do, the other anarchist and whatever other bad ideas he may have had that he was saying to Wizard. So I think it's the movie still addresses it quite well, and like we said, you almost come along on this journey with him via the shots and the scenes in the film. So I'll give it a 1 for sure.
The way they demonstrate his character, as I said, it's with the ties to the stranger and that entire theme, which is one of my favorite ones. I have to give it a 1.
It's presented extremely well.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm gonna go 1 as well, for reasons that I have already stated. Yes.
Okay, and Scott, you're on to antagonist.
Well, of course, it's all the scum of the earth. It's hopefully the rain, i.e., as embodied by Travis Bickle himself, gets washed away from. But I mean, yeah, it's just the shady side of society. The worst of humanity, and even the worst that he, in himself, that he sees. Like, I think you're right in the sense that, yeah, he sort of seeks it out because that's all he can see. So therefore, that's all he wants to see. But I mean, again, I say this a lot, of course, and you can bust my balls as much as you want. But I think it's more pertinent in this movie that the assholery of humanity in general.
I think it deals more with class struggle.
So I don't know if I get that.
But here's the thing: is he's seeing the worst of. I think the idea of seeing the senator, seeing Betsy, seeing her world,
maybe
versus
I get
him,
it, but
and like it's. I don't think it's the assholery of the world. I think these are the realities that they exist in, and what his messages are. We need some what I need you is to not be give high ideals, but to actually fix what is
fixable
wrong within our system.
I get it, sure. I'm not saying I'm discounting that.
Yeah.
I just think it's, again, maybe they're just enfolded, into each other.
I'm saying that
under a general umbrella, kind of.
There's a reason that people are jerks, and we shouldn't just go out and shoot them to fix the problem.
Fair enough. I mean,
right. Well,
I don't disagree with that, but
I think that's a large part. But I think it's a large part of what this movie says, despite the fact that he calls out, prostitutes at several points in the movie. He also, a young prostitute, is one of his closest allies, friends, whatever, in this movie. I think that, and he embodies a lot of the bad habits, I guess, that he looks down on other people for. And I think it's kind of looking at this society that he thinks is just basically garbage people, and showing what parts of him also mirror that society.
Yeah. It's true.
But he's popping, I think, caffeine pills throughout his entire thing.
I always took that earlier.
Yeah. And he says that he's against drugs.
Yeah.
He's doing drugs.
He doesn't like people who use women. He watches porn in theaters, which again is one step removal in a sense
Sure.
of like, you have women being, regardless of those kind of thematic things, he is part of the system that he hates so much. But because of his willful disenfranchisement with it, he views himself like
As somehow above it,
morally superior, but when he's not.
Right.
Sure.
He calls Sport a killer when he has no actual evidence for that, and then becomes a killer himself at the end of the movie.
Sure.
So I think that this is kind of shining a light on him saying, hey, yeah, you're saying all these terrible things about everybody that's here, but if you weren't already those things, you certainly are by the end of the movie. Your anti-hero is by the end of the movie all those things that he hates.
Sure. All right. So how about this? We'll call it society's demons and your own demons. Both of those are the antagonists. And, I don't mean that as facetiously as I might have otherwise, but that certainly I think is included in there. And they touch upon aspects of both, sort of flesh them out and show you the repercussions of both sides. And I think that's always going to be effective, and especially so in this film.
I think so. You could certainly call Harvey Keitel's character an antagonist, but
Sort of,
I think
but
it would be.
Yeah, he's more of a sub one at
Yeah,
best.
I was going to say that. I think it would be disingenuous to call him the antagonist of
No, he's not
Travis.
Yes, exactly.
He's a part of the system that Travis hates, but
Yes.
he's not. He's just like a minor cog in that.
Yes,
I would say
that's well said. Yeah, I agree with that.
I'm giving it a 1. I guess 1's all around.
Yes, I believe so.
Yep.
It's very complex antagonist here, many layers.
Sure, but handled well.
So I'm on to protagonist, which is Travis Bickle, who's the person you follow through this entire movie. And if you haven't noticed already, he's an incredibly complicated character. We touched a lot upon his personality already, and like this is a masterpiece. So on the one hand, you're very sympathetic to him throughout this entire thing because you see his tragedies through his eyes. But when you start to think about it, he's an awful person who he's planning to kill a senator because a woman who works for that senator as a campaign manager spurned him.
Yes.
He
somehow, yes.
Hell has
case
no
closed
fury.
right there.
And
Like
somehow
a
he's-
Travis scorned.
But yeah, and somehow we're still supposed to be sympathetic, and we end up being so.
and
like,
you are, and he ends up doing somewhat the right thing,
at the
I
end
don't
of
But
the day,
almost out of panic.
accidentally. Kind of,
Yeah, exactly. Well, he freaks out at the rally, goes home, drinks a bunch of booze, and pops a bunch of pills, and it kills a lot of people. And you're like, oh yeah, that's the thing you should have done.
But at least he kills the right people. You know what I mean? Like you can look at it that way in a sense, in quotes. But sure, I just want to nitpick you. He doesn't get freaked out. He thinks he's going to get caught at the rally, so he leaves it.
There's a part in this movie that's great where he's talking about how he doesn't have anything to fight for anymore.
Yeah.
He's a soldier. He's a Marine.
Yep.
And he came back, in a sense, to nothing.
Yes.
It's implied that he fought in Vietnam.
I think it's more
He
than
has all
implied.
those-
Like it's obvious, but yeah, sure, it's still part of his history and character as well.
And again, he's desperate for something worth fighting for. He tries to find Betsy, who's worth fighting for, and that
So
falls
he
through.
thinks, yeah.
He finds Jodie Foster's character, something he could go to war for. And it's a really, tragic piece.
Yes.
So, I don't know,
I think it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
It's at the end of the day, it's a character study of again of a disenfranchised person trying to find themselves in modern society, more or less.
yeah, I don't know. He's a very, very, at the same time of being like kind of I very much hesitate to call him a bad person, but he has a lot of awful tendencies.
Sure.
And
I wanted to make the joke real quickly earlier that he's almost like Rorschach as well, which we even
Right.
outright kind of saw similarities there. But go on.
from the Watchmen.
Yes.
yes. As I was saying, he has all these terrible tendencies, but the fact that you see his struggle and it's portrayed so viscerally
Yes.
in the movie, it really makes you, I guess, root for him, regardless
Like I said,
of
you get dragged along on his journey, and
right.
even if you don't want to, you
regardless of whether you
yeah.
agree with him or whether
Exactly.
you think that he's a good person or not, you're kind of rooting for him,
Yes.
either way.
Well, it goes by everyone's their hero in their own mind.
Right.
And this is really that story, because if you went
That's true.
from
That's a
a
good point.
different perspective, he would have been the villain of this.
Yep.
So this entire movie is incredibly complex. It's such a fascinating character study building off of this. And I feel that every person who watches this can find something to be sympathetic with in his character.
I agree with that.
So I've been in a situation like his, and I understand what he's going through. Maybe I would not have gone to the extreme lengths that he did, but it's, I don't know. Again, I have nothing to.
It's one of the most famous. De Niro is famous for a reason.
He crushes it in this.
Yeah, and exactly. So I have actually wrote one exclamation point for my score here.
So watch this instead of Bad Grandpa.
Yeah, please. He just a little trivia, right? He ad-libbed that entire scene in front of the mirror. I think
it was like outlined,
right?
but he I don't know if he ad-libbed it fully, but it was like it was the script had something like it, and he just kind of went off on it, sort of riffed on it, essentially.
I always thought that was a cool little,
it's a little piece of
about
filmmaking
movie,
history, but for sure. And of course, he was getting into the character and just going, fucking talking to me, fucking scumbag, and it became so famous because he did such a good job. Specifically, it's one of the most famous lines and scenes,
right,
in film history, even. But for sure, I mean, he's always been a great character. I always return to Travis Bickle. Like it was nice to watch this movie again. I haven't seen it in a couple of years, and it's still great. And he still does a great job as Bickle.
Yeah. So one's all around for that too.
I believe so. Yep.
Man, this movie's gonna get a 10.
It's a fucking masterpiece. Yeah, of course,
definitely is.
Although I want to knock off points for the very sappy moments in there somewhere, but
where in the diner when he's calling her square?
Yeah, that's
no,
I can't.
Sure, but it only looks.
I'm tempting to, but I'm not.
You only want to do that in retrospect, but it's perfectly fine in the film.
Yeah.
Go on though.
So, Mr. Ramosi, supporting cast.
The supporting cast was pretty terrific. A lot of actors who I'm not sure if they were all big beforehand, but they certainly, a lot of them became big later on.
Yeah.
First and foremost, Jodie Foster did a really good job as Iris, as she was really young in this. Sport, her pimp, played by Harvey Keitel. Matthew, yeah, was his real name. Keitel is just awesome.
He's always awesome, especially, and he's also young as hell in this.
Yeah, exactly. Everybody's baby faced. De Niro looks like he's 20.
Yeah.
But Peter Boyle still looks like he's 500.
Except for Peter Boyle. Fine.
Yeah, that's true. I'm pretty sure that Peter Boyle has looked the same for the last 55 years. So.
Yes.
Albert Brooks plays this really protective guy at
He works with Betsy at the campaign.
Betsy.
He's like one of the managers.
He's
of the
the
campaign.
best afro in the world.
Betsy's played by Sybil Shepherd. She does a good job too.
Yep.
But Albert Brooks has this one part that made me just laugh out loud. I think Ian laughed at this part too.
I know what you're gonna say.
De Niro's there, talking to Betsy, and he's in the background of every shot. And finally, towards the end of the conversation, he peeks around from behind a post, a wall. And
it's like a Three
just
Stooges thing almost.
It's just his afro and then his eyes, and that's all you can see.
You can see that's funny.
Hilarious.
It's a comedic moment, but also it's a character moment because he's now threatening. He's nervous that another guy is coming in off the street to try to basically pick up what he thinks is his girl. Yeah. So he's awkwardly, clumsily, nerdily, creepily trying to see what they're doing.
He says "I love you" to her at one point, and she totally blows him off.
Yeah.
She's not even listening.
She
to him.
doesn't care at all.
Yeah, so that's all funny, and I agree with you. Everyone, they basically round out again the time and the place of this world, and they'll do a good job at it. And like I said, because it's a character study, and so De Niro sort of eats up a lot of the actual film screen time, but that's all fine. Even the senator did a good job with the small parts he was in.
But you missed the most important supporting character
Is
of all.
Is it the guy
in
the cab?
No.
Guns?
Oh.
No, that guy was good too. But it was New York City.
Yeah, okay.
And all of the small shots of people.
You're right about that. It's a good point.
For some reason, Robert De Niro's character just stares down black guys. Throughout this entire
everybody on the street,
but he has these kind of really aggressive moments where he's talking, but you get to see every aspect of people having fun, going out for the night, people going through tragedy. The guy with who wants to go kill his wife, the drunks stumbling on the city blocks. It almost felt like an episode of Taxicab Confessions, but what really dense and concise.
No, you're right. New York
showing all of the. It's an unfiltered look at New York in the 1970s of this is what your city is like. Mm-hmm. This is what it, and it's not trying to either portray it as bad or good. It's just
here it is. Yeah,
here it is.
You're right.
Yeah, here's the streets.
No, that's a very good point. And because of that, it adds even more layers to it.
No, without that, the movie would be good, but it wouldn't be as good.
I agree, for sure.
Yeah, I would say that it's New York, and all these supporting characters are at least somewhat the same way. But it's New York, but it's not. It's New York through Travis's eyes is what
Sure.
you see.
It's sort of a distorted vision, but
Right.
of things that are still based in reality.
So it's not necessarily good or bad, but everything has kind of this like dangerous tint to it, you know, which is great in the movie. But I'm sure there were sections of New York in the 70s that, you know, weren't always like really seedy like you see everything in this film. Or
Sure, I
But
guess
again, you're seeing
it's through it's a lens of his
Right.
character, but it all I agree that it all serves that focal point very well.
But if I'm going to do my thing of one supporting character, one of his cabbie friends is this black guy. I don't think you ever know his name or anything.
They say his name
It's-
once or twice, but maybe just once.
oh, they definitely say it. I forget what it is.
He gets introduced to him.
But yeah, he's just always, he doesn't really say much, but he's always in the background, and I don't know. I just really liked his character.
He's got his posse of
Yeah.
misfits.
He has like
cabbie
one
guys.
line, yeah. That's anyway. Supporting cast is getting a 1 from me.
Yep, same here.
Okay, Scott to dialogue.
Now, this not a tough one, but again, because it's sort of like the sign of not how should I say it? Because of the progression of movies, you could make an argument that some of it is a bit stilted, and especially the more you know moment, the after school special moment, if you will. But it's not particularly cringeworthy or anything. It's just again the progression of where we come, just in terms of general conversational wise in movies. But all that to say, I'm going to give it a 1 because of the Nero essentially, and everything else is perfectly realistic. And like even the funny moments, like when like I said, when Albert Brooks says, "Oh, I love you," and Sybil Shepherd just says nothing at all to it. Like that's a funny thing that's in it. It's you know the famous "You talking to me," and when he goes to when he murders Keitel and shoots up the apartment building, all that, and especially his diary entries, even like some of those. Of course, the one I said earlier was the rain washing the scum off the streets. Like that stuck with me ever since the first time I saw it. I probably even knew it as a line even before I saw this movie for the first time years ago, and still love it as a line. So it's all damn solid, and I really there's no complaints I can make about it.
To address what you said earlier, I think with a lesser cast, this dialogue could have been bad.
Yeah, wouldn't. Yeah, I kind of can see that.
But they brought it off as natural.
Yes, and I think that's the
And
best thing
it feeling natural watching it helped me to like get into it and
sure, yeah.
have it feel real. And I think that was really I like the dialogue, but I think if it was delivered poorly, it would have.
you wouldn't, of
It
course,
would
yes.
have. I mean, not necessarily. There can be really good dialogue that's delivered poorly, and I'll be like, "That's good dialogue." It was delivered like crap. But like, I don't think this is one of those movies.
Right.
I think if this was done badly by the actors, it would have felt unreal. But because it felt real, I like the dialogue in this movie.
Yeah.
Being an antisocial psychopath like Travis, I get into a lot of awkward, stilted conversations with people on the streets.
It's sociopath. I don't think it's psychopath.
Yes.
Yeah, regardless. Tomatoes. His awkward conversations are spot on to what they are like in reality. Someone talking to you and you not really knowing how to respond or half listening to what they're saying while you're thinking in your own head.
Yeah.
I felt it was all very natural because this is the dialogue to my life.
Fair enough.
There was a lot of pauses and blank space in the dialogue in this, which
Yeah, but I think that's on purpose. Like you
exactly
just said, it's handled well.
It's exactly on purpose, and
And in our podcast.
that made me enjoy it
Sure. And I think
a bit more because it kind of felt like this was a natural
No,
conversation.
exactly. I think that's the key word here is natural, and yeah, being a bitter, misanthropic, antisocial dickhead, etc. Like perhaps that's what your actions are like, and the film portrays that quite well. And everyone else, yeah. And again, all the surrounding dialogue by the surrounding characters, as we said, and perhaps if you count New York's dialogue itself, again, sort of the goings and passings of the city itself, sort of the background noise is there to add to that level as well.
Yeah, it's certainly no Sorkin script, but
Sure.
Yeah, but then-
it's certainly not any worse for it.
But Sorkin wouldn't have been able to pull this off.
Yes.
I like Sorkin.
I like
think
him
he's
too,
a
but
It's
very
neither
good
here
writer.
nor there, but yes, the dialogue for me is getting a 1.
Yeah.
Same here.
You fucking scumbags.
Same here.
Go ahead.
Speaking of it, style, I'm onto that.
This is the easiest one of the,
It's
of the
one
group, I think.
It's a 1.
Yeah.
It's
It's like I also have I mentioned that I have an exclamation next to protagonist. I also have an exclamation next to style and a 1.
Scorsese does a tremendous job with the cinematography of this, with the soundtrack, with that jazz. They don't make soundtracks like this anymore. Like this is one of those that follows you for a very long time afterwards.
It's noir tinge, and like it was perfectly fitting. And there's one somewhat humorous thing you pointed out later on when Matthew Harvey Keitel puts on the record in the room with Iris. It's the jazz soundtrack to the film, or like at least that's what plays in the film. So
I mentioned at the time, it reminded me of The Big Sleep, where they not Big Sleep, The Long Goodbye.
Yeah.
So,
but no, you're right. It's everything about it's perfect. It's some, like the claustrophobic shots, even when he's in the cab. And there's another one that sort of reminded me of Twin Peaks for some reason, but not really. But when he's driving and you see a bunch of cuts of green lights, and then it flashes to the meter, the meter going up. It's just it's a sense of like monotony. He's doing this all day, every day.
I could see the Twin Peaks thing there.
But yeah,
they always showed the scene of the swinging
I know
streetlight.
That's only what made me thought of. But either way, yeah, like you said, Scorsese does a masterful job of using his cinematography to portray Bickle's psychology almost, and his descent as well.
A lot of great pans and like a lot of really, unless you're looking for it, you don't notice the camera movement a lot of times, but it's so subtle and awesome when you do notice it.
There's camera movements. This movie captures the voyeuristic nature of the main character. There's one part where he's on the phone trying to get Betsy back, and the camera just moves away slightly down the hall, like to show you the hallway. You could still hear everything that's going on. It's almost like you're listening to a stranger on a cell phone, and you don't want to be like caught looking at them.
Yeah, you don't want to just look at them.
Look off to the side.
Eavesdropping, but you're right. That's a perfect example.
It just waits there for him to like come back into frame, and like he walks down the hallway after he's done with the conversation.
Yep. So it's masterwork.
It's all top notch, and can't say anything else about it.
Yeah, brilliant.
I'm going to give it a gushing 1, as I've been doing for the entirety.
Ones.
All right, and finally, we're on to recommendation with Stephen and Mosi.
This film is a film that I think everybody should watch at least once. And honestly, if you are into film at all, and if you like kind of darker movies, and if you like movies about kind of psychology of people that are kind of on the fringes, you should probably watch this every year or two.
Yeah, why haven't you seen it beforehand, of course, is the question, but
it's just the kind of movie that you can watch over and over again and still get the same kind of feeling from it as the first or second time that you watched it.
For sure. I mean, I've seen this movie probably over 10 times now upon this viewing. And yeah, I agree. You can always return to it. It always just speaks to me, at least, and it's just a great piece of filmmaking. And I think its legacy also is there are so many films that would not exist. It sort of serves as a template almost, and the next decade or so following it, I think a lot of other lesser films tried to rip it off, and it's still known and referenced. Of course, it's in we're doing MOTSterpiece, so it's in the AFI. I think it's number 50 something, so somewhere like that. But it certainly deserves to be seen multiple times. I agree, and return to it every couple years because it's still fucking great.
I'm going to slightly disagree with both of you. One, I absolutely agree. It deserves multiple viewings, but for a different reason. Because I think it'll give you different messages as you grow on in life. I think if you're in your teens and you watch this, it'll speak to the angst of that. And now watching it as I'm older, I'm looking at it as I'm watching kind of myself as a younger person here, and all of the decisions that I made that I shouldn't have. Again, it's a complicated piece.
The film may not change, but you do, and you can still.
But your interpretation of his actions change,
right?
And it's wonderful each and every time.
I mean, everybody, there's so many. I don't know if they still do, but when I was in college, everybody had like the poster of him with the finger gun to his head and a little drop of blood dripping off of his finger, and that was like huge, and it was just Taxi Driver is so badass, man. And now you kind of go back 10 years on from that, go back and look at it again, and it's kind of like, it's still pretty badass, but also there's so many other things lurking there underneath the surface
for sure
that are just really interesting to think about and interesting to delve into. That this movie does.
I think that's another good point. It's the message of it still stands. Of course, you can change your interpretation of it, but nevertheless, I think it's still a relevant film. Even if it was made in 1976, I believe. Yeah, it still stands at the time. I would say, I was jokingly just said, why haven't you seen this film? And if you haven't seen it in a while, go watch it again.
And in fact, considering the political and economic situation of today, I think it's even more relevant because it's going back to that same kind of mentality of the disenfranchised.
Same arena, if you will.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So who's got the calculator?
Well, I mean, it's going to be some complicated math here, but I think It's 10s all around.
Yep.
Which gives it a aggregate score of 10. A perfect movie and one you should all see.
Absolutely.
Check
All
it
right.
out.
I'm Jonathan Ian Manser, here with Stephen Ramosi
Have a good night.
and Scott Thurlow.
And someday the real rain will come, but not today. Good night.
We hope you've enjoyed your stay.
MOTSterpiece Theater.
Join us again next time, won't you?
MOTSterpiece Theater.
Music and editing by Chris Morgan.
MOTSterpiece Theater.
Editing and engineering by Stephen Ramosi.